Well, we are finally here. We're at the point where basically every set is like 200 cards minimum, and these are going to just keep getting longer and longer because there's just so much to go into. Hey guys, this is GamerCow. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. This time we're on Celestial Storm, our 2018 Worlds format. Very interesting set here, mostly for the actual cards that are in it, because there's a lot of Gen 3 nostalgia stuff in here. Most of the cards are like Gen 3 redesigns and stuff like that. We get even like GXs ended up being printed based on the EX that was initially there, so that's kind of cool. There's a lot of stuff which isn't that in here as well though, so there's a bunch to go over. But the other thing that's kind of cool about this one is that it's a 2-week format. Like, that sounds kind of weird to say, oh, that's a really cool thing, but Worlds basically came 2 weeks after this set, so it was like just within legality to play at Worlds. And I don't know, there's something neat about like seeing brand new decks and stuff there. There's one card in here in particular which was like massively impacted by the rotation that's about to happen. This guy, who has like an absolutely busted version of his deck pre-rotation, and then post-rotation it becomes more fair. So, I don't know, stuff like that's kind of cool. And there are plenty of events which happen before the next core set comes out to dive into as well. But we will just be playing this set new in this format. We will not be doing like a Sun and Moon to Celestial Storm as well, because that's basically the same as this but just more restricted. There's not much that we couldn't do otherwise. What I do want to highlight though is we finally have access to Tapu Lele, the Psychic type. This was out in Japan for like a year before we got it, and that's why its promo number is only 45. Unfortunately, this does not stay in format as long as it should do because of that, because I do believe it gets rotated for the 2019 World Championship, which is really annoying. But this means that Psychic decks, or aka Malamar, have a way of actually not having to play counter energy in order to do their magical swap shenanigans. So Malamar's spread is actually something which is viable from this set, and will likely be shown too if I can get the deck type right for it. The other Tapus finally get a single prize card as well. Tapu Bulu is like okay if you use your GX attack very early in the Vikavolt deck. You can get 120 damage out of this thing as a one prizer. That's like fine, but next set's gonna have a better Tapu Bulu I think, so we don't really need this one. And then Tapu Fini needs a water Pokemon to be healed during the turn in order to do 120 instead of 60. It's free energy, which is really kind of expensive, but thankfully double colors could be used. There is a mana fee that came out in Shining Legends that lets you heal one of your water Pokemon for 20 each turn, so in theory this could happen. The problem is it's 120 HP itself, which means Zoroark just kills it, so like, it's not enough damage output, but at the very least, you know, it's cool that we get it. So I want to go over the trainers first, because as you can see there are quite a lot of them. This is something which is just going to happen in every set from here on out. There are quite a few alternate art prints in here as well though, so we can ignore a few of these. Acrobike gets a reprint here, which is pretty cool. In this particular format it's not very strong because Garbodor is still being played all the time, but Garbotoxin Garbodor does rotate basically straight after this, so it does have more time to flourish in the next format, so that's kind of neat. But yeah, just a decent speed card to have around, I suppose. Apricorn Maker gets a reprint all the way from Skyridge back in Generation 2, so it has been clarified at this point to make sure that you cannot search for Bursting Balloon, you know, because it's got ball in the name, but it has to be the word specifically. Just a text modified just to make sure that it is specifically searching for Pokeball type cards, so that's cool. Speaking of Pokeballs you could search with it, Beast Ball is in here. If you are familiar with the modern game, you'll recognize this as basically Hisuian Heavy Ball. It only works for Ultra Beasts, but it does let you get the evolved Ultra Beast as well, Naganadel, so that can be kind of cool. But basically, yeah, you look at your face down prize cards, take an Ultra Beast that you find there, replace it with this card, and shuffle the face down prizes regardless. If you don't find one, this goes to the discard. So yeah, really good card to have around. It's another item as well, so it can definitely help speed things up. One of the decks I want to play this time is an Ultra Beast based deck, so I definitely need to fit one of these in, because it's very good. And yeah. A lot of supporters do get rotated as far as like the good draw stuff. We are losing both N and Sycamore. So Bill's Maintenance, it's not going to fill the role. This card is not very good, really. It was only passable at the time because we didn't have better options, but yeah, the shuffle before drawing just kind of kills this card because you can't play it if it's the last card in your hand. So yep, pretty bad. Copycat makes a return as well. This is not generally played very often because hand sizes don't tend to be that large at the end of a turn, but it's always possible, so yeah, we're happy enough to see that. Energy Recycle System, Rescue Stretcher for basic energy. This makes a return from Gen 4, I think it was last in? I think it was in one of the early Gen 4 sets, and usually Energy Recycler is going to be better, but if you either want the first effect or you don't always need to shuffle 5 energy back, this card could end up being good. So I'm thinking of things where, like, you know, maybe a dragon type or, you know, Ultra Necrozma potentially. You could use this to recover the metal energy if it gets discarded. So that's kind of neat. Good stuff there. Energy Switch gets the Gen 3 artwork reprint again. There's a few things like this in Super Scoop Up. I'm not really going to mention all of them, but there's a lot of Gen 3 love in terms of the artwork in this set, so that's kind of cool. Fisherman stays in format because of this print. It was about to rotate, but thankfully this keeps it in. The full art is not in the set, which is kind of weird, but it's just how it be, you know. Fenball makes a return from, I think it was Aquapolis is this one, but it was one of the e-reader sets this came in. Search your deck for a Pokemon of the same type as one of the opponents. In the olden days, we used to use this because Dunsparce was in the format, and that let you basically search for Delcatty pieces, which was really good. Now, we could do the same thing for Tapu Lele if we wanted to. So this could be like a... If the opponent's playing Malamar, you could search yourself a Lele sort of thing. You could argue Mysterious Treasure is just better in that case, but there are some other things this can do well, right? Fighting types are all over the place, so you could use it against Buzzwole decks, etc. So there's some good stuff for it. Hiker is a very weird card. I think this does see some play in a couple of control decks, but it's usually not the best option because we get an item card that kind of does most of what this does later on. You look at the top 5 cards of either player's deck, choose one of them to go on top of the deck, and the rest get shuffled back in. So you're using it to usually to manipulate the opponent's top deck, but if you have something like a Oranguru in play, you could use this as a half a Mallow sort of thing, right? Of getting the right card from your top deck back, and then just going, put that on top, and then go draw that card with Oranguru. It's not the best use for it, and obviously Mallow is probably better in that case, but you have the option to control the opponent too, so there you go. Hustle Belt and Last Chance Potion don't generally go together, but they are cut from the same cloth here. If you have 30 or less HP remaining on the Pokemon that you use one of these on, you get to do like a big effect. Hustle Belt does 60 more damage to the opponent's active. Absolutely ridiculous, to be honest. And Last Chance Potion heals it for 120. Both of these see play in different decks. Hustle Belt ends up seeing play in the Spiritomb deck, which does self-damage in order to get itself down to a low enough total. This lets it hit, you know, really good, very strong numbers for that. And Last Chance Potion sees play in a dumb Donphan stall deck, which we will get into the Donphan for in the next set, Lost Thunder. Life Herb gets a reprint here as well. It's never going to see play because it's on a coin flip, but there you go. Lycia is a often forgotten about trainer, I think, from Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Search your deck for up to 2 Prism Star cards. Not typically seen in most decks, but there are a couple which use like all of the Prism Star categories, you know, like the energy, the stadiums that will come out later on, and the Pokemon. And sometimes you just want a one-of that can search out, you know, like Tapu Koko Prism and Thunder Mountain later on. This can do that. So yeah, it does see a little bit of play because of that. Another Pokeball that we could get from Apricorn Maker is Lowball. This sees play in exactly one deck that I remember, being the Vikavolt deck later on, because Charger Bug is busted, but we'll get to that. The reason it's played is because you flip 3 coins, and for each heads, you put an evolution card from your discard pile into your hand. So later on, the Charger Bug basically lets itself be an energy card, and that lets you recover it, you know, and it doesn't even take your attachment for turns. Broken. Master Royale doesn't see any play whatsoever because it's locked to stage 2 grass, water, or fire Pokemon, but you can energy accelerate from hand. Whoop-de-doo, right? It's definitely too limited to see play, but it's funny to reference the alternate Kukui, like, identity here. Pokénav gets a reprint from Gen 3, looking at the top 3 cards of your deck and taking either a Pokemon or an energy you find there to the hand. The other cards go back on top of the deck in any order, so you could turbo with Acrobike, more or less with this, right? Take one of the Pokemon or the energy that you want, rearrange the other 2 so that you can, oh, it doesn't have to be like rearranged at that point because Acrobike just discards the other one. Pidgeotto later on would bottom deck the card, so you don't discard it immediately. That might end up being relevant. Who knows? Rainbow Brush, I remember playing this in exactly one deck later on. You choose an energy from one of your Pokemon, search your deck for a basic energy, and swap it with that card. When you're using multiple different types of energy in the same deck, this is what you play it for, to make sure that you've got all the attachments lined up properly. There's Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres tag team later on that takes all 3 different types of energy for each of the birds, and sometimes you need to swap one of them out so you can actually attack. Rare Candy gets its Nostalgia reprint here as well, pretty cool. And then one we have all been waiting for, Shrine of Punishments. This was one of the big reasons that I had a harder time than I wanted with my spread deck, because this would have been super good for it. Between turns, put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon GX and EX in play. So this punishes Lele obviously a lot, but it's not just Lele, it's going to punish a ton of the best decks in the format are basically always going to have GXs and stuff in them. So if you can build a single prize deck, and believe me, there are plenty that you could do, this card is absolutely insane for such a strategy. So really cool. There is another stadium in here as well. Sky Pillar prevents all bench damage done to all bench Pokemon, so that's kind of cool. It's probably not going to come up too often. One trick that you could use with this, though, if you played this, the problem is it would stop the opponent from taking damage as well, but it's like a cool trick is if you could stop your own bench damage, so like Earthquakes and stuff like that. Rule of Evil from Weavile would unfortunately not work very well with this because the opponent doesn't take bench damage either, but yeah, cool idea at the very least. Steven's Resolve is a disgusting control card. That's all I have to say for it. Search your deck for up to 3 cards, put them into the hand, shuffle the deck, end your turn. So it's effectively Magical Ribbon on a supporter card. Sylveon is nothing but a control card in most situations, unless you play it with Gardevoir, so yeah, it's kind of gross, but it's gonna see play if control decks actually do end up being played here. They are extremely strong in the upcoming format. They're probably really good now as well. I have seen a few top, but yeah, we don't like them, so we're probably not playing them. Simple as that. Tantalizer is a very cool card because it's another option-based supporter card. You either shuffle draw 5, so the same as a Shauna, which is rotating actually, so kind of cool to have that back, I guess. Or you switch your active with one of your bench. Now the Shuffle Draw 5 is slightly weaker than Cynthia, of course, and the switch is like, it's a switch, right? So it's not like the best thing ever, but having the choice as to which one you use really makes this good. Like, this actually sees quite a lot of play, and you'd maybe be surprised at that because it doesn't look that good. But just like Giovanni's scheme way back in Gen 6, having the option of doing multiple things with this makes it super good. We do see this kind of effect almost always end up seeing play whenever it's actually around, you know, these sort of optional stuff, because there's always something good that you can get out of it. TV Reporter is here as well. The draw 3, then discard a card. It is marginally better than how you wouldn't think so because you have to discard something afterwards, but that's the part that actually makes it better, which sounds weird to say, but sometimes you just need stuff in the discard. Like Malamar would play this over how they would play other stuff over this, of course, but still. And then we have Underground Expedition making its final return to the TCG, I think, at the moment. Not really going to see too much play, because I don't think, but there's always the chance, like, getting 2 cards out of the bottom 4. There is a Pidgeotto that bottom decks cards as a sort of acrobatic style thing, so I guess you could use it there. You're probably not going to, though. But yeah, that's all the sport stuff. Rainbow Energy is staying in format like for 2020 because of this, but this doesn't actually change legality at the moment, so I guess there is that. But it's cool to note nonetheless. So, on to the myriad of Pokemon that we have here. I'm probably going to skip over some of the stuff, but there's a lot of good ones to talk about here, so we'll gloss over some of the other like reprints that don't really see much use at the moment. Like Vitrubel doesn't really see a lot of play because it's a stage 2 with a coin Pokemon catcher effect. We have seen this so many times before, the coin flip kills it. So there's not really any point of that. The Cypher's Twin Play might actually matter if you want to play Scizor in a future set, but the Scizor in the set's not super good. We'll go over it as we do. Despite the fact of Ariados is a very cool Pokemon to have back here, I'm honestly not even considering this. The HP is just abysmally low. It gets KO'd by even basic hits that don't take like full energy and stuff. And yeah, Flareados is technically possible, mostly, but not very good here, really. Reactive Poison does do quite a bit of damage. It's just not enough, really, at this stage of the game. So, yeah. There's a Sceptile, which ends up coming in handy with the Sceptile GX that's in Lost Thunder. This thing prevents all damage done to Pokemon with Grass Energy by the opponent's Ultra Beasts, so that can just completely shut down particular matchups. And Powerful Storm, if you can get a lot of energy in play, is like okay, but probably not going to come up. I don't think the Sceptile deck plays that much energy because it's an energy efficient deck. So it's mostly about just getting enough energy into play so that all of your stuff is immune to damage from these Ultra Beasts, because they're kind of ridiculous. So yeah. There's a Shiftry GX that isn't amazing, but the GX attack is kind of gross, I suppose. Grass Double Colorless to choose one of the opponent's Pokemon and shuffle it back into the deck. That's kind of funny, I suppose. You could technically win the game with that if the opponent doesn't have any other Pokemon down, but they always will by the time you get this charged up, so whatever. 180 damage if you match the opponent's hand size for that. Cost is also just not quite there, but I guess 210 with a Choice Band technically KOs Zoroarks and stuff, so whatever, I get, you know, it is what it is. There's a pretty funny Volbeat Illumise combo here. If you use the Illumise's attack in the previous turn, Volbeat does 100. Very cute, not very powerful, but it is there. Cacnea Catturn is another throwback. It has basically exactly the same attack as it did before. I think it maybe does like 10 more damage or something to Catturn, and it's got a little bit more HP, but it's nowhere close to being usable. Dhelmise actually is usable though. This comes up in post-rotation Vikavolt decks. 130 HP and it does 130 damage for 2 Grass and a Colorless. You can't attack with it in consecutive turns, which is a little annoying, but it's okay. You can get it out of the active again. It's a single prizer that does a lot of damage for that single prize, and that's really good for the Vikavolt deck. So yeah. Magcargo gets a reprint. It's gained 10 HP and lost an attack from its old version. It doesn't have knockover anymore, so it can't discard Stadium in play, which is a little bit of a shame. That actually came up quite a bit. I remember dying to that once as well, which was kind of frustrating, so you know. But Smooth Over is still a fantastic ability. Letting you do half of a Mallow for an ability is insane. We will already see this in Buzzwole decks right now, but we're going to see it, like Zoroark decks obviously would adore this thing, and I'm going to play it in Grand Bowl in Lost Thunder, because it's such a cool card to have for that set, to be honest. There is a Blaziken GX in here. The non-GX Blaziken is in Dragon Majesty, which comes out after Worlds, which actually synergizes with this a lot because it's a reprint of the Firestarter one from the very first Ruby Sapphire set. This one, on the other hand, is all about the big damage number. So you discard 2 fire. For 2 fire in the colors, you do 210, which is a heck of a lot of damage, to be honest. That's really good if you can keep charging it up, which is something you will be able to do if you can fire starter. So yeah, it synergizes with its own evolution line. That is kind of nice. Blaze Out is also good. We had this on Umbreon GX, but it costed dark and double colorless. Discard 2 energy from the opponent's Pokemon is a strong effect to have around. So yeah. There's an Oricorio, which can gust in one of the opponent's Pokemon and burn and confuse the new active for just 1 fire energy. If you have access to Rainbow, or if you're playing fires and stuff anyway, there's a chance you could play this, but it's only really disruption, not like too strong, to be honest, but it's still pretty cool. Articuno GX might be my most hated GX out of this set. This is nothing but a control card, and it makes me sad. It's a reprint of Articuno EX from before, but it has a GX attack that the original one did not have, if I remember rightly. Like, I don't think the original had 2 attacks. I'd have to go look it up. Legendary Ascent is the first thing this does. It basically forces itself into the active if you want. When you bench it, you will always want to do that because that's part of the appeal of the card. It lets you move other water energy to it as well. So that's designed to power up Ice Wing, but all it really does is it forces itself active, it moves a water energy to itself, and then it cold crushes to discard all energy from itself and the opponent's active. And that's enough in the control decks because they're trying to stop you from playing the game, and discarding your energy, very good way of doing that. There is a 60 HP mod kit that will be relevant if you play Professor Elm's Lecture in Lost Thunder, so bringing this up just because it actually does matter sometimes for that deck. There's a 70 HP one for most every other deck at the moment though, so that's fine. And then the Swampurt's actually really good. We'll see this quite a bit. Once during your turn before you attack, discard a card from your hand, draw 3 cards. So it's trade with a +1, but it's on a stage 2. Might seem like that's too slow, and often it could be, but we will play this specifically in 2 decks. There's like a Meganium deck that does a bunch of evolving stuff this can play in, and Gardevoir is the other one, post-rotation, because there will be a way of searching rare candy in that deck. Hydro Pump is also pretty okay, 80 damage for 3 colorless energy, 20 more for each water that's attached to this thing. The main time you will see this used is if Super Boost energy gets put on it, because then it's got 4 water energy attached to it, and it does 160. So yeah, good counter to the fire type stuff later on as well. There's Ludicolo in here, which to do the Ludicargo stuff, it's exactly the same type of thing as what was in Gen 3, but unfortunately Circular Steps is too weak at this point. Caps out at 180 damage, which is good, but like that's a lot of investment for it, so whatever. There's a Wailord with 220 HP here as a single prizer, so stall decks rejoice, I suppose. Whoop-de-doo. There's a Clamperl that's got that evolutionary advantage thing, so you can evolve going second on your first turn. Unfortunately, Huntail and Gorbis are both kind of bad, so there's nothing really to go into. Regice is sort of neat. If it's active, the opponent can't play stadium cards, so stadiums are going to get absolutely gigantic within the next format here, so this can be pretty strong just for that alone. Icy Wind is not amazing, but sometimes it can be okay, I suppose. Kyogre is actually something that I saw in a topping list. I say topping, it's like top 32. But still, it was in a list that was like in a big regional next format. Dual Splash is not the strongest thing out there, but 30 twice is not awful for 2 energy. Then 120 sorry, for Grand Wave. Not being able to attack with Grand Wave next turn, a little bit awkward, but it's a decent amount of damage. It's a single prizer, it's got the magic number of 130 HP, so like I can just about see it. It's okay, I guess. The Voltorb, if you have any energy attached to it, doesn't have a retreat cost, but if you have energy attached to it, that means that you're probably in a weird spot with electrodes, so I don't know about this one. 190 HP is very frail for an Evolution GX, but it is what it is, I suppose. It's mostly here to KO itself anyway, so big risk on this Pokemon. but you get to attach 5 energy cards, not just basics, from your discard pile to your non-GX, non-EX Pokemon in any way that you like. So, it's a really good accelerant, and the cool thing is with this card, you can then evolve into a GX Pokemon, and it's still perfectly fine. So long as you attach before you evolve, you're good. The actual attack you might use here is Crush and Burn GX, so you discard any number of energy from your Pokemon for a Lightning and a Colorless, and do 30 plus 50 for each energy that you discarded. So if you did attach to the Voltorb, one thing you could do is get the second energy down, detach basically both energy from this thing and any others that you need to secure the GX KO, and then next turn, assuming this thing survived, you blow it up and accelerate all the energy back, and go from there. Kinda cool. Lantern gets a reprint. I'm pretty sure this was from Legend Maker? No, Legend Maker was later on. Hidden Legends, I think, was the one where it this was part of the stage 1 like toolboxy thing at the time. If it's on the bench when one of your Pokemon gets KO'd by damage, you can shift a basic energy to this guy. And then for 70 damage for Lightning Colorless, discard all the Lightning if you want to, do 140 instead. A little bit low on the damage numbers here, but single prizer stuff sometimes could see play. Built-in experience share is cool after all. There's a Manectric that follows the soon-to-rotate Talonflames thing, where if you go second and this Pokemon is in your hand when setting up, you can bench it, or put it as your active Pokemon. This is a little different from the Talonflame because it has to be when you go second, instead of just either first or second, but also you can play multiple of them down if you have multiple in your hand. Why would you want to do this? Well, it's got 0 retreat still, so that's kind of cool. But it's also got double charge. So for 1 lightning, you do 40 damage and attach up to 2 basic energy from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. So you can get a lot of acceleration out of that too. Unfortunately, Professor's Letter rotates, so it's probably not very good. But hey, it is how it is. There's an Oricorio, which basically does more shrine damage. 30 damage to each Pokemon GX or EX in play for 1 lightning energy. It's kind of cool, I suppose, but it's on lightning, so it doesn't tend to work as well with most other spread stuff. Mr. Mime is also here. There's going to be another Mr. Mime, I think, in one of the future sets. I don't remember which one, but it basically does the opposite with the ability here. This thing will not take damage if that damage is an even number. So, up to 260, so if you do 280 damage, it works. But, yeah, 20, 40, 60, 80, blah, 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 all the way up to 260. You don't take any damage if your amount is that number. It does not have a weakness, so it does not get doubled from Psychic stuff, so you can't manipulate it that way. And it only has 150 HP, so it's tied with Marshadow as the lowest HP on a GX Pokemon. Its ability is also, like, it's fine, but its attack is not particularly good. For each card in the opponent's hand, put a damage counter on their active Pokemon for a Psychic and a Colorless. That is pretty bad, to be honest. And Life Trick GX is god-awful for a GX attack. Yeah, it only costs a Colorless, which is fine, but you only heal the damage from Mr. Mime. In what world is this thing actually going to have damage on it and survive? Possibly from spread? But actually, most spread is even numbers. Like, 20 damage spread is the most common thing it would be hit by, so I don't know. It's pretty bad. There's a Swalot, which is reminiscent of one of the ones from Gen 3. I forget exactly which one, but it's not very good, so nobody really cares. The Grumpig, I don't think is reminiscent of one. But if you have the same Pokemon, if you have like the same Pokemon in play as the opponent, you do 80 for a single Colorless. That's kind of cool, I suppose, but yeah, you probably Lele is the only thing you would really have that on. I don't know. You could play in a Boswell deck, I suppose, for the mirror match, because it's weak to Psychic. That's kind of cool. Solrock and Lunatone get a reprint from Sandstorm, I think, is the hollow ones in there. Or at least a Lunatone, maybe? I don't know. This was later on. I don't remember. Anyway, the point is, if you have a Solrock in play, Lunatone prevents Fire, non-GX and EX Pokemon from having abilities. Very specific, but most GX Pokemon of the Fire type don't have abilities anyway. So this is it's effectively just stopping Macago, but you need a Solrock in play, and there are a couple of them. I think this one's probably the one you would play, not just because it gives the Lunatone 130 HP, because that is kind of good actually, but more because it is Mysterious Treasure searchable, just like the Lunatone. You are likely going to be playing that if you're playing the two of them, but there is a Fighting type one in format if you're playing Brooklet Hill instead, so yeah. Otherwise, they're not great, like their attacks still do exactly the same thing they did back in Gen 3, so kind of whatever. Solrock at least only has a 1 retreat this time, it had a 2 last time, so I guess that's cool. Bayonet gets a couple of cool cards in here. I don't think this one sees play, but it certainly could. When you evolve into the single prize Bayonet, it target whistles one of the opponent's Pokemon, or Echoing Horn if you know the modern game. Basically just makes one of their basic Pokemon go from the discard to their bench. So that's kind of neat. It forces like an extra card down for stuff like Empoleon, I suppose, if you really wanted to. Things that matter for every Pokemon in play. But also it means your spread damage can do more. And its own attack can do more as well. For a Psychic and a Colorless, you look at each of the opponent's Pokemon in play, and then put 1 damage counter on their board in any way that you like per Pokemon. So you put an extra 1 down with its ability, then you can do an extra damage counter placement. Kinda neat. The GX is where it's really at though. This is a reprint of Banette EX from back in the day, but it has a GX attack as well now, so yeah, it's stronger than it was before. This does see play with Zoroark mostly, but also Garbodor, Banette Garb is a thing in this format as well if you want. It's only 190 HP, so it is really frail, but it does resist fighting, which is pretty important for the Zoroark deck in this format. So you can use it instead of the Garbodor, more or less, to like mimic that style of thing. Its ability lets you shift the damage counter from one Pokemon to another Pokemon whilst it is active. And for single Psychic Energy, both of its attacks are very accessible. 30 damage, plus 10 for each supporter card in your discard pile, up to 100 bonus damage. So 10 supporters in the discard, 130 damage, that's where you cap out. Tomb Hunt GX is basically Hollow Hunt from Decidueye. GX attack that just puts 3 cards from your discard pile into your hand. Very, very powerful. So this card's really good. And Zoroark doesn't have a GX attack it can use in almost every game anyway. So being able to use this one, very, very strong. So yeah, super good card. We do lose the Evolutions Mewtwo in the next rotation, but this Deoxys is a very close substitute. Power Blast actually does kind of come up if you play this in Malamar, but it's mostly about Psychic. It's the same thing as Mewtwo's Psychic, double colorless energy, 20 plus 20 for each energy on the opponent's active, so this can still counter Buzzwolls and stuff like it did before. The one problem with this is that it is 120 HP, which is a breakpoint number. This will be much weaker if you're forced to bench it versus Zoroark decks and the like. 120 is just accessible for a lot of stuff, including itself, funnily enough, although it is weak to itself, so that doesn't matter. 2 Psychic and a Colorless for 120, discard 1 energy. Pretty okay. But I think Malamar decks generally have better options, and really this is going to be in like a double colorless thing like Passimian that really has to hit the Buzzwolls and stuff like that for weakness. There are other Deoxys as well, but all of them are terrible, so we're not really going to care about that. Lunala gets another card in here, which is sort of interesting. If it has a Psychic Energy on it, it takes 20 less from attacks, which is genuinely good. But the rest of it's really bad, and it's still a stage 2, so like, come on. Also, Dark Week, Zoroark's gonna just eat it alive, unfortunately. And its attack is still really bad. Lunala just can't catch a break, man. 3 Psychic Energy already just says don't play this card. 80 damage. That's basic Pokemon level here. It does do 20 more for each energy on the opponent's active. But guess what? That is just a slightly bigger Psychic. Why are we not just doing this one? Yeah, it does less damage, obviously, but why are we not just doing this because it's on a basic Pokemon for 1 energy that's double colorless? Just like, no, it's really bad. Donphan is hilarious, actually, because this is a reprint of the very first Donphan from, like, Neo Genesis. Literally the only thing that's different about this is that it's got 130 HP instead of 70 now. Just, and it doesn't have a resistance to lightning anymore, so it's actually worse than it was before. So weird, to be honest. Pupitar also has the same like reprint thing as well, which is kind of cool to see, just not like good, obviously. Medicham is supposed to work with Hustle Belt. If this Pokemon has 30 or less HP remaining, 2 fighting energy do 170 damage. You put a Hustle Belt on this thing, that's doing 230 at that point. Diancie makes it 250, and that KOs like every GX that's currently in the format. Kinda gross. It can do self-damage as well, but the problem is it's like 90 HP on this thing. So how are you getting it down to that sort of HP total? I don't think there really is a way at the moment. And 2 fighting energy is also a lot to ask for as well. There's a Claydol over here that lets you combine it with Steven's Resolve. Its attack does 40 damage per Steven's Resolve in your discard pile for fighting double colorless. It's a little bit too expensive to charge. If it was for DCE, then it might actually be playable. But even then, Steven's Resolve is still not a great card for an aggro deck, so bleh. Regirock actually does see some play, because it's a single price fighting type that can do a reasonable amount of damage for 1 energy. Only 120 HP kind of sucks, but it does 40 damage for 1 fighting if it has a tool card attached to it. So go Strong Energy, Choice Band I suppose would probably be the one at the moment. That's 90, Diancie gets it to 110, that KOs Zoroark in 1 energy. So kinda sweet. Groudon I don't think sees any play here, but the artwork is really cool, so I just want to highlight it. There's a Palisand over here that is far too expensive for everything it does. 100 damage for 4 energy is just ridiculous. But Sandy Fear is kind of a gross attack, if you could ever get it going. So I just want to read the GX stat because it's insane. For 2 fighting and 2 colorless energy, you look at the top 13 cards of the opponent's deck. Very specific number, but there you go. Discard any number of Pokemon you find there and do 60 damage per Pokemon discarded this way. Yeah, that's kind of disgusting. Doesn't do much, but it's funny. There's a Minior that lets you basically thrust it into the active for reasons. It doesn't really do very well though. I think the Minior, the most recent one I think does this as well, but it has a much better attack than this thing. Swift is just garbage, so, and it's a 2 retreat, like, sure, I guess if Floatstone was a thing, but then why would you put this on the bench in the first place? Just bad. Alolan Raticate GX is very funny. If it wasn't weak to fighting, we would probably actually play this, to be honest. For no energy, this 200 HP stage 1 discards up to 2 cards from the hand and does 40 damage per card discarded. That's pretty good, to be honest. Choice Band gets to 110. Like, yeah, respectable. Hyperfang, too expensive, nobody really cares because it's a flip tails do nothing thing. But Item Maniac is a really good GX attack as well. For no energy, you search your deck for up to 6 items, put them into the hand. Yeah, the opponent can just N you, but guess what? N is rotating, so it's like Judge only, and Judge doesn't get played that much because it screws you over too much as well. So yeah, strong card, just it's weak to fighting, so that's a huge problem. Sneasel and Tyranitar get their original artworks back as well. The Tyranitar is like damage scaled from the original one in Neo Discovery, but it's still really bad because it also damages your own stuff, which is gross, so whatever. Sableye I have seen played. I forget exactly which deck this was in, but it's also a reprint from a Gen 3 set where it lets you discard the top card of your deck if you choose. You do get to look at the card, so it's like see what card is on top, discard it if you want to. And Disable is annoying. It's probably never going to see like play for that, but at least it's for colorless energy, so you could irritate the opponent if you're locking them out of a good attack. So yeah. This Steelix is terrible, but it's got 190 HP and is a metal type, so you can use this with Metal Frying Pan and make a really annoying lock stall. Not even a lock deck, it's a stall deck. It's gross, nobody likes it. Scizor GX is another reprint. I think it is of Scizor EX, but unfortunately the crosscut attack is now a GX attack, so like this is just ass, to be honest. 210 HP, but if it has 100 or less HP remaining, then it does 80 more damage to the opponent's active. It's going to need that damage buff because its attack is Steel Wing for 80. which is gross. Metal Colorless, 80 damage, reduced damage by 30 next turn. Unfortunately, if you're getting the damage buff off of that, you're still basically dead for using this. And 160 isn't even enough to KO anything anyway that's like relevant, so that's kind of terrible. Its GX attack takes more energy as well, so that's already a bad sign. For 3 colorless energy, it does 100, and if the opponent's active is an evolution, it does 100 more damage. So that's kinda good, but it still doesn't KO Zoroark, or basically any evolution GX that's like relevant. So yeah, pretty bad. Speaking of bad, I believe this Mawile has not seen any changes whatsoever from its print in Generation 3. With the exception of course, it now hits GXs for bonus damage as well. Whoop-de-frickin-do, it's 50 for 2 on those. That's just, no. It's, yeah, this is so bad. I can't believe they actually reprinted it like this. It's just miserable. There's a couple of good things about the Metagross line in here. There's a Beldum that doesn't have as much HP, but it does let you retreat for less for each Beldum that's on the bench. So this is probably the one that you would play for Metagross decks. And Metagross decks are still playable at the moment, so that's kind of neat. Metang, I think, is a little better than the other one. Doesn't do as much damage with the it doesn't have a second attack, but its first attack is a bit more accessible, so that's kind of neat. And then the Metagross from this set is a 170 HP single prizer that basically makes Steven's Resolve have no drawback. So if you could manage to get this into play before playing any Steven's Resolves, then yeah, make it your active Pokemon and you don't end your turn with it anymore, which is pretty good. Sadly, that's where the good stuff ends, because the rest of it's really bad. For 1 Metal Energy, Meteor Mash does 60, and if it stays in the active, you can do 120 with Meteor Mash next turn. Whoop-de-frickin-do, that's not how the deck would play anyway. So yeah, pretty bad, but it tried. Registeel, I think, saw some play. It's 120 HP, but takes 20 less damage from attacks, so that's pretty solid. And Silver Fist is the same as Argent Wing on Shining Lugia, but it takes Metal instead of just 3 colorless energy. So Metal, double colorless, 60. If the opponent's active has an ability, 60 more damage. I think this did see some play in Metal decks. I remember seeing this, like, at least as a consideration, so it's kind of neat. Jirachi Prism is a meme and nothing else, because we can't really get it into the prize cards at the moment, I don't think. If you take this as a face-down prize card and your bench is not full, you get to bench this card and take 1 more prize. That's the goal. I don't think we have any ways of like forcing it into the prizes at the moment. I could be wrong though, because I think maybe it's an expanded thing. I think this did see some sort of gimmick thing at some stage. Its attack is terrible, so we're not really even going to bother speaking about it, because the opponent just switches and they don't even get KO'd. Heatran, pretty bad, don't really care. Solgaleo doesn't have a weakness if it has a metal energy attached. Guess that's kind of cool. And Rising Dash does 130 for 2 metal on the colorless, not affected by resistance, so it can KO electrics as well. Sure, I guess it's fine, but like on a stage 2, nah, just play the other one. Celesteela is pretty cool, and I need to add this to my deck. My mental reminder to myself here. Celesteela is a 140 HP 1 prize basic, so pretty bulky. It's weak to lightning, not fire, so that's good for the metal decks in general. And resistance to fighting is actually really strong because of Buzzwole, so that's already good. But its attack often leaves a lot to be desired. Moonraker does 160 damage, which is very good. But the problem is it costs 5 energy, 1 metal and 4 colorless. However, it's an Ultra Beast, they all have a prize-based gimmick, and if there are exactly 6 prize cards left to take on the field between both players, you can use this attack for a single energy. So manipulate the board state correctly and you can get a huge hit off with this. And yeah, it only gives out 1 prize, so it's pretty cool. Kartana, on the other hand, not exactly very good, because it's only got 60 HP, so moving on. Stark Attacker is the main reason I want to play the Ultra Beast stuff this time round. It's not like too different, I suppose, from the deck that Sai played initially in Forbidden Light. but Ultra Wall is amazing. Only 180 HP on this thing, so it's a little bit frailer than the other, you know, like metal type stuff you'd see around it. But your Ultra Beasts take 10 less damage in general from the opponent's attacks. So this includes snipe damage too, which means Tapu Koko becomes useless when a couple of these are in play. Its attacks both cost 2 metal and colorless energy. The main attack does 120, so a little bit underwhelming, but you know, you can put Beast Energy on this thing at least and do 150. Choice Band then gets to 180, which is sometimes relevant enough. And Assembly GX is a finisher, because it does 50 for each prize card you have taken. So it's the same attack, just a bit more expensive compared to Salazzle GX. Pretty solid. Somehow also only a 3 energy retreat cost, like what? This thing should be a 6 energy retreat cost, let's be honest. You know. There's a couple of bag-on in here, but the Salamence is not amazing. If it's your active, you can boss the opponent, boss his orders, so that's kind of cool. Force the opponent to switch to what you want them to. But Dragon Claw only does 100 damage for 4 energy, 2 of which are different colors. Get out of here, dude. There is a Salamence GX in Dragon Majesty coming up that lets you retreat this for free, but that requires you to then switch into it to do the thing, and why are we not just playing Guzma at this point? Yeah. The Prism Stars, however, are actually really cool for the Dragon type. Latias is the one that you'll tend to see more often. It's 130 HP, 1 retreat, and its 1 attack lets it do 30 damage for any energy, and attach a basic energy from your discard pile to each of your basic benched Dragon Pokemon. That's really good for the Rayquaza that we'll see in a couple of minutes, so yeah, super cool. For the evolution stuff, I think there is a deck in the end that uses this thing. Latios Prism is 10 HP bigger. Both of them are 1 retreat, which is really good, but for a double colorless energy, Dragon Fleet does 50 for each of your evolution Dragon Pokemon in play. Yeah, Dragon Majesty gives us a couple of good ones we can use with this. Obviously the Prism Star rule kind of messes them up a little because they are like 1 per deck things, but the fact that you can use them anywhere is really solid. And then the Rayquaza itself, this is the first Rayquaza that uses Grass and Lightning Energy as its thing. It used to use Lightning and Fire before this thing. I think it goes back to that too in the VMAX, it's kind of weird. 180 HP, a little bit frail, heavy ball searchable for this one set if you wanted to play it. Free energy retreat honestly is kind of annoying, but we'll live with it. And it's got 3 exceptionally good texts on this card. Stormy Winds is an ability. When you bench this Pokemon from the hand, you can discard the top 3 cards of your deck. Sounds pretty bad, but if you do that, even if you don't discard one, attach a basic energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. So yeah, you just get energy acceleration even if you do not have a discarded basic energy. So long as one is in your discard pile at the time of resolution, you're good. Dragon Break as its main attack for Grass, Lightning, and Colorless does 30 for each basic Grass and basic Lightning that you have in play. So Vikavolt stats, obviously. This gets played by itself because of Max Elixir, but post-rotation, Vikavolt is perfect for this card. And Tempest GX is a really interesting take on Drampa's setup move. For 1 Grass Energy, discard your hand and draw 10 cards. So yeah, if the opponent doesn't immediately end you, you are getting a monster hand out of that. It's kind of ridiculous. Lastly, there's like 2 considerable colorless Pokemon here. Dunsparce is a really fun one because it's just like a 1-for-1 reprint, I think, of the original one. There's probably some difference in here, but I think this is exactly the same card as before. The problem is we have like no attacking going first, so Strike and Run is not nearly as good as it used to be. And realistically, if we're going to do this kind of thing, we're going to play Alolan Vulpix, because it doesn't take energy to attack, so it's a lot easier to get into the active and then just do the thing. Also, we've got Bridget at this current moment, and then next set we've got Professor Elm's Lecture, which will generally get played instead, so we don't need this kind of effect. Disappointing, but you know, very cool throwback nonetheless. The slacking is also a throwback. If this is active, the opponent's Pokemon have no abilities, except for this ability, obviously. Unfortunately, the rest of it is kind of bad. Critical move is not that weak, though. 160 for 3 colorless energy, you discard an energy from this thing and it can't attack next turn. Maybe with triple acceleration energy you could use this, but I just don't see it really. However, with Garbodor rotating, there's no way of stopping non-GX evolved Pokemon from having abilities later on in the format, so, you know. There's a niche, but it's not very good, really. And then lastly, I want to go over the Kecleon, but the Delcatty I guess should probably also get spoken about. If you evolve into this thing, you get to put 2 supporter cards on your discard pile into your hand, so kind of like Lusamine, but without the stadium part, but also without taking the supporter for 10. Control decks might be able to use it, so it's there. And then Kecleon, we're going to see the other 2 unit colors in the next set, but for some reason, they started with unit color too. Don't ask me why. If you have the unit energy, which corresponds to lightning, psychic, and metal attached to this thing, it changes type from colorless to lightning, psychic, and metal at the same time. So you get to hit all of those weaknesses with one thing. It's a little bit expensive to attack with though, 3 colorless energy to do 80. If you're hitting for weakness, that's okay. It's an 80 HP fighting weak Pokemon though, that takes a specific special energy to attack. This is a little awkward to say the least, but this one being able to be like Malamar Ultra Necrozma compatible, like there's a vague use for it, but I don't think these types are like what you need to hit there. It can't KO Gardevoir in one hit with choice bands, so I'm not really sure this is actually good enough. But it's cool, so I guess there's that going for it. And that's it! Honestly, a lot to speak on here, and I've definitely glossed over a couple of things that we could have maybe spent some more time speaking about, but this set is huge, and it's only going to get worse as we go along as well, so we've got to kind of cut the losses a little bit in places here. Thank you very much for listening if you've made it this far. We do have an absolutely gigantic rotation impact video to record here as well, so hopefully we can get that done in a reasonable time as well. We're only taking 1 session in this set for battles because there's just not a lot of unique stuff that we want to do. Most of the stuff that we want to do we've kind of already played, so the guys just want to move on, and I am totally fine with that because Lost Thunder is going to give us like 7 episodes worth of stuff if we wanted to. So yeah, with that said, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care.